Good evening and welcome to the January 19th, 2023 Open Space Conservancy Trust video meeting. I'm Carolyn Mercer, Chair of the Open Space Conservancy Trust Board. Tonight's meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel tomorrow. Parks Operation Manager Sam Harb, Natural Resource Project Manager Lizzie Stone, and Deputy Public Works Director Eileen Summergren are joining tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members may be listening to the meeting by telephone or via internet. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us tonight. To kick things off, trustees, please make sure that your microphones are turned on. And Sam, I'll leave it to you to take roll.
Okay. Chair Mercer.
Here.
Vice Chair Poor.
Here.
Secretary Ete.
Here.
Trustee Bender. Trustee Olson.
Here.
Council Liaison Andro.
Here.
Trustee Hildebrandt.
Here.
All right, thank you, Sam. Trustees, before we start the meeting tonight, I want to suggest a few rules to help the meeting to run smoothly. If a board member has a question, please use the raise hand feature, and I'll do my best to recognize trustees in the orders in which hands are raised. Everyone will be asked to limit himself or herself to one question and a clarifying question if necessary, so that each trustee has a chance to ask a question before the board member is given another chance to ask a question. It's important that each trustee has an opportunity to speak or ask a question before a second question is asked. Additionally, I'd ask that prior to speaking, you state your name for the benefit of those who are listening in on the meeting. Individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone, via Zoom, or in person at Mercer Island Community and Event Center, provided, however, that they've registered their desire to speak with the city staff by 4 p.m. today. Our city administrative staff will call on you by name or telephone number when it's your turn to speak. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the Open Space Conservancy Trust on any item. All remarks will be addressed to the trust as a whole and not to individual trustees or staff members. When it is your turn to address the trust, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Sam, will you let me know if anyone has signed to appear before the trust?
We do not have anybody to appear.
Okay, thank you. So let's dive into the agenda then. The first item of regular business is to review and consider approving the minutes of the October 20th, 2022 meeting. Are there any edits, revisions, or suggestions concerning the minutes as they were sent out to you before we move on to approval?
Yes, I had a slight revision.
All right, Thomas.
Under the special events policy revision, the motion that I brought forward was to increase the fees schedule by 50%, not 1.5%. So I would like to see that revised.
Okay, so noted. So we'll get that revised. Okay.
Are we raising hands? Or may I have a?
Oh, sorry. Did you raise your hand? I'm sorry.
I didn't raise my
Go
hand.
ahead.
So I just realized. I was caught when I read the minutes by under item 1. It says approved minutes of the July 21st meeting, and it said motion by Poor, and then it said moved by Olson, seconded by Hildebrandt. And I thought we could take away the part that says motion by Poor.
Okay.
And that's the only
All righty.
item I
Super.
have.
Okay.
Yeah, staff can make those corrections. I
Okay.
also want to note that Council Liaison Andrew was not listed in those minutes, so I'll be adding her name to that as well.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I overlooked that.
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't there. No.
Yeah. No, you were there. I saw the video.
Yeah, I remember the meeting.
All right, any other additions, comments? Okay, then I'll, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as they will be revised as suggested?
So
I
move.
move.
Okay, who said, who moved it?
Wasn't Tom move and I'll second it.
All right,
So
so
Tom,
moved.
great, okay, all right, so all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any nays? All right, so the motion is approved, the minutes are approved, and we'll move on to the next item. All right, the second item of regular business is the 2022 annual report to City Council and the 2023 work plan. And tonight we have Lizzie Stone with us, Natural Resource Project Manager, who's going to take us through that.
Hello, good evening. This is Lizzie Stone speaking. I'm going to share my screen here just to be able to show the annual report. I don't have a presentation for you, but I have
Okay.
this report, which y'all have already seen. But I know that y'all have already read this. I just wanted to go through it and highlight some important points and some things that were accomplished in 2022. This annual report will be going to City Council in their March meeting, March 7th, I want to say, once there are any revisions that y'all suggest have been made to it. So just to run through some of the things we summarized here, that the Open Space Conservancy Trust held 4 meetings in 2022. We had changed to quarterly meetings, and those were all held on Zoom. We had our annual elections, which are summarized here. With our staffing, we had some changes in 2022. We went from having 2 3/4 time staff to having that were managed by the Parks Operations Manager to having 2 full-time staff, myself as the Natural Resources Project Manager and Andy Prince as the Urban Forestry Project Manager. And both of those positions are still managed by the Parks Operations Manager. We also piloted a new position, a seasonal volunteer coordinator position in 2022. And this was in place of working with external partners like Earth Corps and Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust. Both of those organizations that we had worked with for our volunteer services before had changed their operations and capacity in ways that made it much more difficult for the city to meet our needs and our goals with our volunteer program. So we brought on that new position. It started out as a 6-month position to lead volunteer events in trust properties and other parks around the island, and then was extended to be 9 months, and it will be extended or will be a position again next year. So I'll talk a bit more about the accomplishments of volunteers on trust property, but overall it felt like a pretty big success to have that seasonal volunteer coordinator position. And then finally, we also had our seasonal trails and restoration crew. That was 3 staff members for 6 months, starting in April through September. As a summary of our forest health and the forest management that took place last year, we had, I feel like, a very successful year working, doing restoration work on trust property. We continued to progress the forest health plan that was put in place in 2008, and I'll talk about some of those benchmarks as a little later here. We worked on 21 acres of trust property and working with professional contractors and our seasonal crew, as well as a lot of volunteers out there. We focused a lot of all of our professional contracting work this year in Pioneer Park. We had contractors doing maintenance and watering on plants that were put in 2021. in addition to having them do invasive tree treatment and ivy ring maintenance on just over 8 acres of Pioneer Park Northeast and Southeast, as well as starting our ground ivy and herbaceous weed removal. So the comprehensive removal of all of that ground ivy, also on just over 8 acres in Pioneer Northeast and Southeast. And if y'all have walked through those areas, you will notice a pretty dramatic difference in the areas that received that treatment. So it's pretty exciting change to be able to see. Our volunteers with our new seasonal volunteer coordinator, Jordan Fisher, this year, there were 11 events posted, or 11 events hosted on trust property, and 179 volunteers came out to pull weeds and manage our trails and plant trees in Pioneer Park. That was for a total of 425 volunteer hours. We had volunteers work in Pioneer Park Southeast, removing a lot of ivy from the forest floor and creating ivy rings around our canopy trees. In addition to planting a lot of trees and shrubs in that cleared area, we also had volunteers out to repair some trails in the southeast and the northwest quadrants of Pioneer Park. We received really positive feedback from the community about those events overall. Our seasonal trails and restoration crew, we again had 3 crew members that were working from April to September. They did a lot of ivy rings along near the ravine trail in both Ingstrom and Pioneer Park, preventing ivy from growing up a lot of our canopy trees there. It was really necessary, and it was a pretty dramatic difference of all the trees they were able to save there, as well as planting maintenance on 5 acres of Pioneer Park. So a lot of planting maintenance of some plants that went in several years ago and needed some weeding around them and to be mulched and reflagged so that we can find them more easily in the future. In addition to that, they did surveys of noxious weeds throughout the park and treatments of some of the weeds that were found. They also did a lot of trails work in 2022, brushing back plants that were growing into the trails to make them more accessible, as well as doing some stair tread repairs and replacing water bars to improve the water flow on the trails and prevent erosion. And then finally, they worked with our parks maintenance crew to complete a project that was started in 2021 along 84th Avenue Southeast, the west edge of Pioneer Park Northwest, where we were decommissioning an area where folks had been parking off of the road. So we finished this project finally in December of 2022, so just about a month ago. We installed some parking delineators to make more clear where folks should be or should not be pulling off of the road. And we used excavation equipment to break up some of that compacted soil that folks had been parking on for years and incorporated a lot of mulch into that. We also, and then came in and planted along that edge to encourage native species to start to fill in some of the area that we are trying to reclaim from the cars. I encourage you to go out and take a look at it. It was a pretty fun project to plant and to finish getting those delineators in, but challenging at times too, because that ground was very compacted. So feels like a success to have completed that one. Progress on the forest health plan. As y'all may remember, the trust properties have a forest health plan that was put together in 2008 that outlines the goals and benchmarks for the properties for their restoration. There have been really successful years with meeting those benchmarks and beyond, and also some years that have been really challenging. In the recent years, contracting costs have gone way up, which exceeded the budget that we have available for restoration in the parks. So we have been falling behind on our benchmarks, but continuing to make progress. In 2021, the Forest Health Plan proposed starting our herbaceous or ground ivy and herbaceous weed removal, which we were not able to start that year, but we did manage to get started this year, which, as I mentioned before, we worked on just over 8 acres, and it was a big success, but was not actually up to the benchmarks that that were set in the Forest Health Plan. related to these benchmarks and the forest health plan, this year we were able to secure a levy that is going to fund a lot more restoration work in Pioneer Park. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on with a later agenda item, but that will be kind of resetting our benchmarks and what our timeline is for when we're going to get this work done, because we now have a plan with funding intact for us to be able to accomplish the goals of that original forest health plan. So that's pretty exciting change. As for the letterboxing program that was put on pause during COVID and has not been started up yet, we are having conversations with our recreation team and plan to work with our volunteer coordinator next year to get that program up and running again. Leash policy, the city posted some social media posts as well as some posts on the city website about the leash policy in Pioneer Park and other parks around the island. And then there were educational brochures stocked at the kiosks on trust property. There were no law enforcement issues noted this year with off-leash dogs on trust properties. Moving right along, our trails program, as I mentioned before, the natural resources crew did some work on trails, a lot of brushing and management of water on the trails by replacing some water bars in the southeast quadrant. We also had a couple of trails volunteer events with the Mercer Island Mountain Bike Alliance. They re-graveled certain trails in the northwest quadrant and filled in some potholes. It was a pretty successful event. We had a lot of cyclists out there repairing some of the trails that they ride on. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about this with a later agenda item as well. But this year, the City Council passed a resolution to direct the transfer of the title of Engstrom Open Space to the Trust Board, and that the final step in that process will happen early this year. So that's exciting. Also in 2022, we updated the special events policy to include updated fees and staff costs for hosting special events that are relevant for today's world. So those were approved, I believe they were presented in July and approved in October, I want to say. And then finally, the last section of our update here is urban forestry. We have had our urban forest project manager monitoring our trees to mitigate risk or tree risk. And they have done some corrective pruning throughout the park, as well as 7 tree removals to reduce the risk of tree failure in the parks. And that monitoring will continue over time. So that is my summary of our annual report to council. And I want to open it up to y'all to make any suggestions or changes that you have before we present this to City Council in March. I can stop sharing.
Okay, Craig?
Hey, Lizzie, great report. In the seasonal trails and restoration crew, the 2 paragraphs, the second one, we all know it is describing off-street parking, but it doesn't actually say that. So in the second sentence of the second paragraph, it just says, project to limit off-street along 84th Avenue Southeast. I don't know if we should add the word parking, off-street parking.
It sounds like we should add the word parking. That's a thing I could definitely do. Yes.
And then in the very last sentence, says the semi-permanent parking delineators were also installed to clarify park boundaries. Was it really to clarify park boundaries or parking boundaries? I'm not sure.
Good point. I think I intended to say park in that case, because we really are trying to show the actual edge of the park where folks should not be parking their cars,
Okay,
but that's
well,
ambiguous and could be slightly reworded. So I'm happy to do that too.
Okay, yeah, great report.
Okay, Jerry, you have some comments?
Yeah, I also thought it was great, Lizzie. Thank you so much. and wanted to question some detailed numbers. In one of the tables at the bottom of page 6, you say 8.3 acres. And later in the report, there's a reference to 8.8. And I just thought that we would want those to be the same if they were supposed to be.
They are. That sounds like a typo. I will correct that as well. 8.3 is the correct number there.
Yeah, that's how great the report is. I have to send to typos to comment.
Any other discussion?
Great.
Okay, Lizzie, thank you so much. You know, I mean, we meet periodically and hear, you know, piecemeal updates, but it's really quite impressive when it's all put together and, you know, a summary of all the activities that have been going on over the past year. So thanks so much.
Of course. Thanks for your feedback and catching those errors on there. If it's all right with y'all, since this is intended to be shared with council at the March meeting and our next meeting isn't until April, is it okay that I make those corrections and then share them with the board chair and to get approval before sharing it to council, and don't bring it back to the group? Is that okay?
Okay, great.
Great. Excellent.
Thank you.
And then Sam, I think, is taking the next
Yes,
section. That's
yeah.
not me.
Okay. All righty. So our third agenda item today is a Mercer Island Parks levy update, and Sam's going to take us through that.
Great, thank you. I actually have one thing to add to the
Oh.
What Lizzie was working on.
Oh, so sorry.
with the
Okay.
chair. I didn't write that in the script, so my apologies, but I'm just going to share the draft of the 2023 work plan.
Oh, the work plan, of course. Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Yes.
So that will also be packaged with the annual
Okay.
report. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen and go through
Lovely.
what we have so far. All right. So starting out in this meeting, January 19th, we have our annual report council. It's what Lizzie just worked on. And then this document, the OSCT work plan, where we develop the topics that we intend to address throughout the year. We started this in our last meeting last year, and this is our chance to review it and make any additions or modifications if we need to. We have the Parks Levy update, which is later in this meeting, as well as the herbicide protocol amendments. The quadrant reports are an ongoing item. And then going into our April meeting, we've got the trail work plan, where staff will report to the trust regarding any maintenance needs in the trail system and activities. The letterboxing program, and hopefully we'll have an update by that meeting as far as where we've gotten with staff and volunteers to get that relaunched. And then the restoration work plan, where we will talk about planned restoration activities and recap the work completed in the previous year. Herbicide application report is also, I believe, intended to recap the herbicide that was used in the previous year. Moving into our July meeting, that's when we hold our election of officers, the off-leash dogs update, and then we hope to have an update on the Engstrom title transfer as well. And then if we do end up having any Eagle projects, we have that earmarked for the October meeting. So as you all know, things can kind of roll over into the next meeting. So we have some a little bit lighter agenda items later in the year, but if there's any feedback on this, now is a good time.
Hillary, I think you have a comment.
Hi, Hillary Ette. Sam, thank you so much for your work on this. I'm wondering if we can add somewhere this year a discussion of how our work might overlap with the CAP report that was recently sent out, the Climate Action Plan, I believe is the acronym. And I know that that's just a draft, but I was very excited when reading through it and wondering where the lowest hanging fruit was for overlap for what we can do to get going on some of those action items.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that that report has sort of reached every team and disseminated throughout the city, but potentially in one of the later meetings, I think that'd be a good opportunity for us to discuss it in relation to the trust properties. Does the October meeting seem appropriate? Or maybe I could just put it on for July?
I'd be comfortable defaulting to whenever you all think it's most appropriate. I don't know where you're all at with deciding how that's all going to be parsed out with the different goals, but I'm just very excited and eager to see what that can look like for us. And thank you. Thanks to all of you for all of your work on that. It's really high time and very exciting.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it on for October, and that'll give us time to discuss as staff, and if anything, an update for the trust to see where we're at.
Great. Thank you, Sam.
Any other further discussion? All right, so Sam, my apologies for trying to bypass you. So now we'll go back to you for an update on the levy.
All right, again, Sam Hart, Parks Operations Manager for the record. Okay. Assuming y'all can see that, move this out of the way. Do I have a confirmation that you can see the?
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Prop 1 impacts the Pioneer Park and Ingstrom open space. So a little bit of background of this issue. This is a renewal of a 15-year levy that was set to expire at the end of this year. This renewal ended the current levy 1 year early, so it replaced this year and to shift it to a 16-year timeline. And this is a continued implementation of the 2008 Forest Health Survey and Forest Management Plan. The kind of, as what Lizzie stated earlier, some of the rising costs and what we've seen with contracted work created a need for additional funding in order to follow through on these plans for the trust properties. So what this levy does is continues funding of open space, budgets, Luther Burbank Park, and as well as increased budgets for playground replacement funds, in addition to increase in Pioneer Park budgets. So the outcomes of how this levy will impact Pioneer Park and Engstrom over the next biennium. Comprehensive multi-year weed removal, enrollment of 6.5 new acres each year, continued annual follow-up treatment of 10 acres, and planting of 900 trees and shrubs. Budget impacts. So this is a significant budget increase for what we have allocated for these properties. We were at about 191,000 in 2022, and that has increased to over 416,000 in 2023, with some ongoing incremental increases, just keeping up with inflation in the budget. Staff impacts. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, did you want to chime in?
Yes, in terms of the budget impacts, it might be important to note that the $191,200 was an amount which had not been adjusted for inflation. So it was basically held constant over the life of the previous levy. So if people look at the jump between roughly 200,000 per year to 400 and some thousand per year and say, why the big jump, you can answer that easily by saying that it really accounts for some deferred maintenance and cost of living increases, which were not adequately captured in the previous levy.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's accurate. So staff impacts, as you all know, the majority of the work we pay for in Pioneer Park is contracted work. You know, we have internal staff, we have seasonal crews and volunteers that do some work, but the bulk of it has always been contractors. So that's where, you know, the bulk of this is going to continue to go. And so that will, you know, lead to increased project management by staff. As Lizzie stated earlier, you know, we've had some adjustments in FTE statuses, or, you know, we've made within the team, we've made some increases to be able to devote some more staff time to managing this work, both in the restoration side and the urban forestry side and Pioneer Park and other, you know, city properties throughout the island as well. So we will continue our volunteer management in the spring and keep that going. And then continued seasonal crew activities. So the crew we get that comes in and helps us out with some of our in-house projects and trail maintenance and things like that. That's what we're gonna hopefully continue to be able to staff for.
Any other comments? All right, thanks so much, Sam. We will move on to the fourth item of business, and that is the herbicide use protocol amendments. You'll recall that the basic protocol was approved at the last meeting, and there were suggestions for amendments to that. And those were going to be brought back this evening for review and possibly approval. So we're going to bring back Lizzie to take us through those.
Thank you. I am swapping around my screens here, just a second. Where did you go? Okay, let me see. Pardon my delay here. Okay, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So as you know, we are now bringing up the amendments to the herbicide use protocol again for continued discussion. As a reminder, the original herbicide use protocol for the Open Space Conservancy Trust was adopted in 2010, and it defined situations where herbicide can be used on trust property. The protocol requires that trust board members review any changes and either approve or reject those new uses of herbicide for Pioneer Park or Engstrom. So since the last revision was in 2016, and the Natural Resources team has been continuing to adapt our restoration approach, paying close attention to what's working well out in the field and also to new research that's published, and trying to make sure that our protocols are in alignment with the best management practices that are recommended by King County Noxious Weeds, among other entities. So these amendments that we are talking about are our attempt to get our protocol up to speed with current best management practices. Okay, so as an overview of what I'm going to present on today that will hopefully help us guide a few further discussion, I want to remind you of what the changes were to the protocol that we talked about back in October. And I also, oops, are y'all able to see my notes here? Or I can't tell which screen is being shared. Hold on, I can't tell, sorry.
No, we were just seeing the slide.
You were, okay, sorry, I can't. Tripping me up a little bit. Okay. Just seeing the slide, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. It'd be embarrassing if you could see my notes, that's all. They're detailed. Okay, so back to this. I wanted to review the changes to the protocol that we talked about in October. I also wanted to go over some of the questions that came up during that first discussion. And those are related to the toxicity ratings that we have for different chemicals, also the biological mechanisms that each of these herbicides uses, and also a quick summary of what other nearby municipalities are doing and their herbicide policies. So let's see. Starting here with a summary of the herbicide use protocol changes that we are proposing here. Last time we talked through the different considerations that we think about when looking at different chemicals. Specifically, we are introducing triclopyr and imazapyr as options for treatment of specific weeds in specific instances. Those two chemicals will be able to be more effective at managing some of the weeds that we find on trust property, and also can be alternatives to glyphosate. But there are trade-offs, and I laid those out for you. As a reminder, the proposal is to allow triclopyr to be used with a cut and treat approach on weedy trees and on blackberry stems where they're growing up through native plants, as well as a spray on certain herbaceous weeds that are very persistent. It also would allow for us to use imazapyr on knotweed where it is found on trust property. I also proposed reducing the instances that herbicide is allowed to be used on English ivy on trust property. The current protocol allows herbicide to be used anywhere that English ivy is a monoculture, so anywhere that it's more than 50% of the plant cover. But I'm proposing that we reduce that allowance to just only be where it's on steep slopes, so that we are still able to use herbicide where needed to manage ivy in areas that are susceptible to extreme erosion. But we are prioritizing manual removal in all other areas because we have seen that is pretty effective on trust property. That is the experience that we've had so far with this work. Next, we had talked about adding the option for herbicide use, a cut and treat approach for herbicide on blackberry stems, specifically where they're growing up through native plants. Blackberry can be very tricky to manage manually when it is growing up right around the native plants that we are trying to encourage to take over and fill in the space behind the blackberry. So I'm proposing that we allow for very select herbicide use on those cut stems to prevent it from taking hold. And then finally, I had highlighted the change to add the treatment of a couple of herbaceous weeds that have appeared on trust property, include specifically yellow flag iris and shiny geranium. that we have found on trust property, and the current protocol does not allow us to do anything about these persistent weeds, and we really don't want to let them take over. So want to do something about it before they become a real problem. And I'll pause after this, but I just want to kind of drive home the takeaway points of these changes. What we are aiming to do here is overall try to decrease our reliance on glyphosate, but glyphosate products such as Roundup. We use that glyphosate as a tool when we really need to, but we also want to have other options so that we don't have to use it if necessary. And the whole idea here is that we want to introduce more effective treatment methods that will allow us to use less herbicide over time. So this will let us really take care of those persistent weed populations that have been around for too long. And that way we don't have to continue treating them year after year. We can actually treat them with something that's effective and hopefully take care of those populations a lot faster and decrease the overall herbicide use in parks. And then again, we are trying to ensure that our protocol stays consistent with the King County noxious weeds best management practices and the recommendations that they have for how to manage the species that are found in Pioneer Park and Engstrom Open Space. So does anybody have any questions at this point about the review of those things, or can I move on to talking about some of those questions that came up last time? Cool. Okay, and I hope that you'll tell me if someone raises their hand because I can't see everybody. Okay, so getting into it. I wanted to provide a bit more explanation about the toxicity categories that were mentioned in the previous presentation. So these are the things that say slightly toxic or practically non-toxic, and I recognize that those are not very meaningful terms all by themselves. So I wanted to explain a little bit. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, is always evaluating research about each of its approved herbicides and their toxicity for different organisms and ecosystems. And they summarize all of that research in a few different ways. So one of the ways is this ecotoxicity category, which sounds jargony, but that's what it's called. So I'm going to stay consistent with it as best I can. And this ranges from very highly toxic to practically non-toxic on the other end. This rating incorporates a lot of different types of data. It creates a pretty complex stressor response profile that includes uncertainties and assumptions made in the research. So it's a very complex assessment. And then it's boiled down to a pretty simple metric of how harmful is this chemical to different organisms at different concentrations. So of the products we are talking about, glyphosate, triclopyr, and imazapyr, they all fall into the practically non-toxic category, or sometimes the slightly toxic category in a couple of studies, specifically in the case of triclopyr with birds or certain types of invertebrates. And that data, there's more data coming out, but there have been some studies that show slightly non-toxic category. So I just wanted to spell that out a little bit better of what I'm talking about when I say practically non-toxic. Unfortunately, there's not a category that is just non-toxic. That's as low as they go. Okay, next, I wanted to touch on the biological mechanisms that these herbicides use to control plants. So these are referred to as the mode of action, and that is describing the process or the enzyme in a plant that the herbicide is interrupting, or how the herbicide is affecting normal plant growth and development. These herbicides are grouped by their mode of action. So the mode of actions are the groupings of mode of action are numbered, and they are listed for every specific product. So you can see that imazapyr is a group 2, and triclopyr is group 4, and glyphosate is group 9, and these are listed clearly on every product label. And the reason that they show this information so plainly and make it so easy to find is that they want to encourage people to not only use one mode of action when choosing treatments, especially if they're going to be using a lot of herbicide in their treatments as their sole way of managing weeds, because that can lead to plants developing an herbicide resistance, which we really don't want. If we're only hitting them with one specific biological mechanism, then they can build up a resistance to that mechanism. I don't want to get too technical about what these what these different modes of action are, because it doesn't really feel that meaningful at a certain point at this level. But I do want to point out that all three of the chemicals we're talking about are have different modes of action, and that will allow us to hit these really persistent plants from a few different sides and actually make our control more effective. That is the goal. And just as like a quick little summary of what these mechanisms are, imazapyr and glyphosate are chemicals that impact some enzymes found only in plants that allow the plants to make or form amino acids. So they are amino acid inhibitors. And then triclopyr impacts one of the growth hormones called it's a type of auxin that is found in broadleaf plants only, but not grasses. And that's why triclopyr is a broadleaf specific herbicide. So all three of them affect a different part of the plant biology. It's kind of the main takeaway point that I think is important here. I could get a lot more in depth about it, but I don't know that it's necessary unless you request it. Okay, and then lastly, I wanted to provide an overview of the herbicide practices that we are finding in other nearby cities. And I've specifically tried to focus on cities that are trying to minimize their herbicide use and to reduce reliance on glyphosate. So it was kind of tricky to track down a lot of this information, or at least the specifics of this information, especially to parse out the differences between more general park uses of herbicide, which includes things like ball fields and lawns and picnic areas versus the natural areas, which is what we're talking about on trust property. I tried to summarize in this little table just 4 of the cities nearby or relatively nearby and what they are doing in their natural areas. And also, I guess I just want to be clear that the city of Mercer Island does not use herbicides on ball fields and lawns or picnic areas as part of our regular operating procedures. So that's neither here nor there for trust property, but just wanted to make that clear that it's not that we're using them a lot in other places. We really aren't. It's very restricted. So in summary, the city of Seattle in 2019, there was a proclamation to reclassify Roundup as a tier 1 chemical within the city. And this was pretty notable because the city of Seattle was using glyphosate pretty widely throughout the city before that. And what that means is that it's not that glyphosate cannot be used ever, but that it has to go through a really special approval process before being allowed. And there are way fewer instances where it is allowed, but there are some cases that it is allowed in the city of Seattle still. In place of glyphosate, they are emphasizing manual approaches. They have introduced fire weeding and foam weeding in some of their grassier, more maintained landscapes. So they're trying to try a bunch of different non-synthetic herbicide approaches, as well as using imazapyr and triclopyr in their natural areas for those really persistent weeds that can't really be handled manually. The city of Bothell has made a big effort to have pesticide-free parks, and they have eliminated the use of synthetic herbicide or pesticides in general, except in the case of regulated noxious weeds and public safety concerns. From what I was able to find, the only synthetic herbicide used in Bothell was glyphosate, and it was used on knotweed, and that data is from 2019. So it's possible that that's different now, but that's the most up-to-date I could find. The city of Portland has a pretty thorough and integrated pest management strategy in place. They identify they outline their process for deciding when you can use herbicides in any areas. They also specify all of the use cases for herbicide, specific plants and specific ecosystems. And similar to every other city we've been talking about, they emphasize manual removal and other cultural methods of managing weeds whenever possible. But for those aggressive, really persistent weeds, they allow for triclopyr and glyphosate in their natural areas. And in specific cases, they do allow imazapyr use. And finally, to touch on Kirkland, the city of Kirkland does not use or is very restricted with their herbicide use in some of the more manicured park areas, but there are no formal restrictions on herbicide use in natural areas. they are very thoughtful about when they're using them, only when extremely necessary, and they're carefully following all King County noxious weeds and ecology best management practices. But they do follow those best management practices and use whatever chemicals are going to be most effective for treatment and least impactful on the environment. So all of that is to say that our recommendations are pretty consistent with nearby cities. And if anything, we are on the conservative end of allowing for herbicide use in our natural areas. And yeah, I think that sort of summarizes the information that I was able to find about other nearby municipalities. So I want to open it up to discussion or any questions that y'all have about the changes to the herbicide protocol. I'm open to trying to answer your questions the best I can.
Thank you for filling in those details.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Any other comments or questions? Jerry?
I just also say that it's very helpful to add another layer of information in our
Yeah.
understanding. Thank you.
I think it puts it in a broader context. So, we know that we're not kind of out there standing by ourselves, that we really are where the community at large is progressing. So that is a very useful, piece of information that you provided. So I see that we're supposed to approve the amendments. I'm not sure. Are we looking at the material that you've just presented, Lizzie, and asking for approval?
Good question. So this is a continued conversation from the October meeting. I
Right.
am not quite sure how this works, but I believe that
I know we have questions for clarification. So I guess the question, and maybe this is a Sam question too. I mean, are we at the position that if no more comments and the group is satisfied, is there a need to formally approve something or, Lisa?
Oh, thanks. I'm sorry. I just got pulled away for a second, but I did want to jump in and just thank Lizzie for
Yeah.
this revised presentation and how very responsive it was to some of the questions and concerns that I and others raised during the last meeting. So super helpful. I have a much better comfort level with this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think
Right.
staff's recommendation would be to make a motion to approve the changes which were outlined on, I think, slide 3 or 4.
Okay.
Is that right, Lizzie?
They were, and also I'm going to share my screen here one more time. So y'all may remember from back in October. Oh, nope, that's not what I mean to be doing. Hold on. I don't know what happened there. Okay. Are y'all able to see this herbicide use protocol here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you may remember from the October meeting when this was originally presented, there was this marked up version of the protocol that
Yeah.
included some minor changes as well as the line by line, word by word changes that we discussed in these presentations. So this is what is being approved as the new protocol. Does that make sense?
So you're asking us, you're asking the trust to approve the revised version that you're showing us?
Correct. The revised version that was presented to the council back in October. I realize that's now kind of
Yeah.
a little
Okay.
more convoluted than I knew than I had intended, but because this was a continued discussion, I guess, yeah, from the original
Yes,
presentation.
I reviewed the minutes, and it appears from the minutes that we did not actually approve the amendments at
Okay.
the previous meeting. So that is
All right.
still an open topic. So it would be appropriate to bring that forward for vote.
Okay, so what we're approving then is these proposed revisions to the proposal that was shown to us last time. Is that your recollection, Tom?
Yes, it would
Yeah,
be
okay.
to the herbicide use protocol as amended.
Yes, okay, all righty. So does someone want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and a second?
I can.
Okay. Any further discussion, or are y'all ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any nays? Okay, and the motion is carried and the protocol has been approved. Okay, super. Let's see, then we have some other business. Sam Harb is going to present on department and city updates. Ma'am?
Yeah, Sam Harb, Parks Operations Manager for the record. Will be presenting a quick department report. So we have, oh, it's not sharing. There we go. All right, so department report, the Open Space Conservancy Trust Board. As some of you might recall, late last year, I believe in November, we had our initial bike skills area meeting at the new proposed location in the Dean's Park area. That was an in-person meeting with a lot of, bike users and young people and parents and people that live in the neighborhood. And we had a number of city staff there, as well as our consultant team. That was our first meeting where we took a lot of feedback and sort of walked the site. Now we have our second bike skills area meeting. This is next Tuesday evening, and that's going to be virtual via Zoom. And our consultant will be helping us, get some more feedback and have some breakout sessions and continue the process. So the little picture on the right is sort of a rough outline of what, it's actually a little bit outdated because I think the yellow entrance line on the bottom, we're actually might be tweaking that. So it's a work in progress is what I'm saying. More information and the latest renditions and updates can be viewed on the Let's Talk page, as well as attending the meeting on Tuesday. So I encourage anybody who's interested in that to attend.
Sam, could you just give us, I understand we should go to the webpage for more information, but can you give us a north arrow on the map? Which way?
Yeah, this is north.
Okay,
So the dragon
Got
is,
it.
I believe, here.
okay,
The little parking lot's right here. The pathway, there's a swing set, and then the
Yeah.
covered picnic area, and then playground.
okay. And Island Crestway's to the right.
Yeah, Island Crestway is over here.
Mhm.
And the proposed layout, and again, this might not be the most updated one, but it's a version of this with some different bike, some different lines with different skill levels and types of features for all different ages. I believe this entrance is actually proposed to be moved over on this side. At least that's kind of the way it's going with the design. So it is a very rough design at this point. It's early in the process, and it's been discussed in the Parks and Rec Commission, and we've had a lot of feedback, and we'll be continuing to refine the design. Any other questions on that topic?
Okay.
So this weekend, in honor of Martin Luther King Day, which was this past Monday, there's going to be a volunteer event. I believe it's over at Luther Burbank and mainly going to be doing some mulching along the south shoreline area. I think it's mostly filled up. There might be a few other openings. Lizzie would know more about that, but if you're interested, you can click on that via our website and sign up if there's still openings. And then again, you know, we'll plan to kind of kickstart our volunteer program up a little bit later this winter, early spring, and get a lot of that back on the calendar for those type of opportunities.
Sam, can I pipe in here for a second about this event?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that it is full. The registration is full, and if any of y'all would like to attend as board members or forest stewards, for some of you, I encourage you to just send me a quick email and let me know. We are at 25 volunteers now, and who knows how many will actually show up, but I would love to see any of you there. So shoot me an email and I would love to see you.
South Mercer Playfield, just down the road from Pioneer Park. You know, this, just a little bit of background, this is a sort of a joint school district, city project. This is a school district property that the city maintains and programs sports and baseball and softball and soccer and lacrosse and those types of events at this facility. The field that you can see in this picture, the one towards the bottom, is the new multi-purpose field, which is in between the Islander Middle School track and the previous baseball softball fields. So that's been opened up already. We've had some programmed events there, some soccer recently, and the other areas are still kind of getting some finishing touches. We've been on site quite a bit. We'll be back out there next week with the contractors in the school district to kind of kick the tires on everything and just, you know, learn the site. But it'll be pretty cool. It'll be able to allow you know, more usage in the wet season because it'll have more synthetic turf surfaces, and there's going to be some different lighting components that will eventually allow, you know, just more opportunities for the public to play their sports. And then there's going to be a ribbon cutting, you know, later winter, early spring, somewhere in there, most likely. A little bit of a parks maintenance and natural resources update. Got our team member Jenny. She's obtained her certified playground safety inspector certification. This is actually pretty hard test and class, and it requires recertification every 3 years. It's definitely not a walk in the park. It's very detailed, and it's a national standard in regards to, you know, playground safety and all of the components of that, you know, the surfaces and the hardware, and just little details about those to make them safe for kids to use. Andy, our urban forestry project manager, has he's recently added the municipal specialist credential to his arborist certifications. He's already been an arborist for quite a few years and has, you know, it's tree risk assessment. He's been proficient in that. The municipal specialist is just kind of another resource to, you know, learn more about urban forestry from a city perspective, and then also there's some networking opportunities there with other cities and foresters in the region. Wrapping up in December, we had contractors that replaced over 90 stair treads handrails and did other repairs in Mercerdale, North Mercerdale, and right-of-way connector trails throughout the island. And then, as you all know, you're in Pioneer Park a lot. Storm cleanup is ongoing. There's always, trees falling over and logs in the trail. So that top right picture, that's, I think, a big maple that came down kind of by the road in the southeast quadrant, I believe. That's just kind of par for the course for this time of year. So as a lot of you've, emailed when that stuff comes in, or used our MI Connect app, or submitted a service request through our website, we have staff that are pretty good about getting out there and getting things safe and open back up. And then lastly, we do have a bike rack installed in the northwest quadrant. So that little picture on the bottom left, we had this rack, in our at our facility. It wasn't being used, so it was pretty low cost install. This is kind of over by the picnic table area across from the shopping center.
Mhm.
And this, I think it's in a good location. It's kind of at this little trail entrance to the park area. It was relatively cheap and didn't take too long to install. Definitely open to feedback, if anything needs to be changed, or if we want to update to a different kind of furnishing in the future to match, more of the wood aesthetic. That's definitely a possibility, but I think in the meantime, we get some nice weather. Hopefully we'll see some folks using this bike rack. And then wrapping things up, just a couple updates for you all. Hopefully you all got an email from our city clerk regarding parliamentary training. That's training to talk about these meetings and some good pointers for that. We have 2 of them, April 27th or May 11th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Those are going to be held via Zoom. If you did not receive those, please email me and I'll make sure you get those Zoom invites, but I would recommend that you all sign up for one of those sessions. I took one last year, but I'll probably do it again for a refresher. And then I know there's been some question of, coming back in person or, hybrid meetings and things. This has been a slow process. It's started to be rolled out in some of the boards and commissions where they've had some hybrid meetings where, some people are at City Hall and some people are at home. It really just depends on what the need is for that, or the specific need of that board or commission. But it has been a slow process, so there's a potential that we might be moving towards that. What we've been doing as far as having the access at the community center has satisfied the requirement of being a hybrid format. So we're not quite there, but if you have any a specific situation where you would lean towards wanting one or the other, we can have that conversation, and we'll keep talking about it as a staff with our city clerk and administration, and figure out what the need is. I think there's benefits to both. There can potentially be additional staff time to have these in person, different types of prep and all that. But so just be patient with us. But if there is any feedback you have on that, or if you think that we can do these meetings in a better way, I'm open to that feedback.
So is your thought, Sam, that we would discuss that as a group, or is that something where you want feedback from us and that's something that staff will make some decisions about?
Yeah, I mean, either or. If you have any, if you care one way or another, we can, it's not really, you know, an agenda item at this point. It's
Sure,
more
okay.
just an operational procedure. So we can, you know, you can email me or we can chat on the phone. But like I said, you know, we still have some discussions to have internally, and it's just been slow to roll out. And I think right now this format works pretty well. And if we did make that change, we'd have to, you know, make some adjustments and,
Mhm.
you know, get to that point. So it might happen at some point, but I don't have a timeline on as far as when that would be.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, more of a comment, really. I would think from practical standpoint, if there was the expectation that there was going to be a large group of people who wanted to make appearances, that would be
Yeah.
something that would push us toward wanting to have an in-person meeting format rather than the remote meeting format. But that's just an idea, just an observation from me. And as far as my personal preference of in person or online, I think I'll just email that to Sam.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? Okay, thank you, Sam. Next up, we have quadrant reports. So let me see, I've got Northwest keyed up here first. So Tom and Hillary.
Tom, you want to go first?
Sure. I haven't spent a lot of time in the Northwest quad, but I was able to go up there yesterday with the dogs and went around the perimeter trails, and I saw that they've been maintained very nicely. There was evidence of a large hemlock that had been blown down on the east side of the park, blocking the perimeter trail there, and it had already been cleared away. And I also saw the crew out there installing the bike rack. So the ink on the photograph showing the installed bike rack is dry, but the concrete is probably still a little wet. But it's nice to see it there. So thanks for that. That's all I have.
Thanks.
I don't have much to add other than what Tom said. I just am constantly impressed by all of the detailed attention that is paid to the Northwest, considering how heavily it is trafficked.
Yeah.
And I think the storm cleanup especially has been really great. And I don't know if you guys have seen on Nextdoor, but there have been some great positive conversations about that too. And so I think that there's a lot of love towards park operations and maintenance crews getting out there. And I just think it looks fabulous. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Actually, I did have one more comment regarding the park. There's or the Northwest Quad. There's a place near the tree that has the heart-shaped moss patch on it, where some traffic, probably dogs mostly, is going behind the tree, and so the trail is starting to shift. So it would be good to get somebody out there and perhaps lay a few large logs or branches along the base of that tree, or else it's going to be isolated and in the middle of the trail before very long. So I think that needs some attention.
Okay, Northeast, Marie, oh, she's not here, and Craig.
Hi, I was out there earlier in the week in one of our little rain shadow events. And the trails are well maintained. A bunch of trees came down, but all of them been cleared, except for one, which I got an email to Sam, and it's that little funny triangle trail area, the overlook where the bench is, and there's it's kind of a shortcut. And I suggested, well, maybe we just leave the log there and close off the trail permanently because it's, you know, a 20-foot detour around the other way. So anyway, just some food for thought. I noticed the patches on the paved path adjacent to Island Crest Way were accomplished a couple months ago. So there was like 4 of them that they did. Probably I'm not quite sure, tree root damage, but it looks great, very smooth. And yeah, everything looked really good. I even made it down to the bottom, which is quite a trek for me. And everything looks really good.
Super. And then Geraldine, Southeast.
Hi, thanks. I have been getting to know the Southeast Quadrant, and often people who've had this quadrant have reported on horse manure, and I will report that I haven't seen much of that at all. So that's a good thing. And just want to echo what others have said. Good work on the blowdowns. And I also wanted to comment, as Hillary did, on all the love from the residents on Nextdoor. People are really singing the praises of the Parks Department, and it was delightful tonight to hear the different staff people, the thumbnails you gave on recent development in this department. So thank you.
Yeah, and I have Southeast also, and I'm new to that area too. I mean, it's very clear that a lot of the work that's gone on there in the past year, you know, really makes this area shine. It's really quite interesting going through there to see the variety of people in the variety of ways in which that you know, segment's being used. So another job well done. So do we have any other comments or feedback about quadrants? Okay, well, we just have a standing bookmark here to have the opportunity to bring forth any topics that we feel ought to be added for future discussions. So I'll just kind of open it up and see if folks have any thoughts of other items that they want to have added to future meeting agendas. All right, well, you know, I'm sure as the year goes on, you know, and issues emerge, I'm sure there will be, you know, more. And that's why we leave the latter meetings with some open spots, because it usually is our pattern that, you know, things will pop up. Okay, so let me see, we're done with the agenda, and I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn. Does anyone want to move to adjourn?
Very well. I move that we adjourn.
Okay, a second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? All right, so we'll accept that motion and approve it. The next open space meeting is scheduled for April 20th, 2023 at 5 p.m. There being no other business to come before the Open Space Conservancy Trust. The time is now, checking my clock, 6:22, and the meeting is adjourned. Trustees, you're reminded to please stay seated until city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening to all, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, good night.